Welcome back to K24 Alfajiri. Thank you so much for staying tuned and all the feedback that we are getting on our social media platforms. Well, it is the third hour, and on this hour, we are going to be focusing on divorce and property. Now, the High Court declared that couples whose marriages end in divorce are entitled to what they each contributed during the union. FIDA had wanted Section 45, Chapter 3 of the Marriage Act that states couples should get what they contributed declared unconstitutional. We therefore want to discuss divorce and property, and that right there is where we start this conversation. Joining me is Tabitha Saoyo. Karibu sana to K24 Alfajiri.
Thank you.
And of course we have Mr. Mbugua. Very nice to have you. Always really nice to have you on Thursdays when you talk matters marriage. And also Mr. Burale will be joining us much later. But let's just get to know our panel of the day. I can start with you, Tabitha.
Yes, sure.
Please introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
All right, so good morning, Serah. My name is Saoyo Tabitha Griffith. I am the Deputy Director of a non-governmental organization called Kelin. We work on health-related rights, and part of our work is to work with women's rights, and in particular, women's land and property rights. We were enjoined in this case as amicus. We got enjoined sometime in 2017, and we were allowed by the court to come on board and give our neutral perspectives as to what we thought about the interpretation of the Constitution vis-a-vis Section 7 of the Matrimonial Property Act.
Okay.
Yes.
Karibu sana.
Thank you.
Mr. Mbugua.
Thank you so much. Good morning, viewers. And my name is Kagwimo Mbugua, and I'm a community psychologist with a very big passion on family. So marriage and family therapy is actually my passion, and I'm very delighted to be here today because I work at the grassroots level, and every day today I come across issues of divorce, issues of relationships that have been broken, and the issues of the property, whatever the couple had attended together becomes an issue. So I'm very, 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 very eager, very anxious to know and to hear more from my friend Tabitha here, who is a lawyer, and the legal implications, and as well as giving my psychological impact on the same.
Very true.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let me start with you, Tabitha. Why did you decide to become an amica for this particular case?
Okay, so FIDA went to court sometime in 2016 to challenge Section 7 of the Matrimonial Property Act. And the reason why FIDA was challenging this particular section is because there was a contestation as to the fact that it offends the Constitution. Now I'm going to try and put this in very layman terms so that I can be able to, communicate to the rest of the public. Now, in essence, what FIDA was saying is that if you read that particular section of the Matrimonial Property Act, it talks about distribution of matrimonial property after dissolution of marriage based on the contributions that each party did.
Absolutely.
Now, the Constitution, in reverse, Article 45, Sub-Article 3, talks about equality during the time of the marriage, at the dissolution of the marriage, and after the dissolution of the marriage. So for FIDA, there was a contrast between Section 7, which talks about distribution of matrimonial property based on your contribution, and the Constitution, which says that you're supposed to have equal rights during the marriage, at the time of the marriage, and at the dissolution of the marriage. So they went to court. Now, we joined onto this case for two prior reasons. Number one, we work with women in the grassroots.
All right.
And part of our experiences informed why we wanted to go to court and give the court our views and to show the court and demonstrate to the court that this is what is happening on the ground. These are the women who are suffering as a result of the gap that we have in the law. Secondly, because of our experience as lawyers, we know about our international obligations, our regional obligations, and just also to give the court what we call in law comparative jurisprudence, meaning that we wanted the court to see what have the courts decided in Ghana, what have the courts decided in Tanzania, South Africa, Australia, the UK, where we borrow half of our laws from. What have the courts said in these countries to inform our High Court and the decision that they were supposed to make?
All right. So what obligation has Kenya signed on international level?
Great.
Yeah.
So just to start off, Our international obligations are anchored under Article 2, Subarticle 5, and Article 2, Subarticle 6 of the Constitution, which says that any instrument that we ratify as a country, then we're bound by it in law. That is what our Constitution says under Article 2, Subarticle 6. Now, when you look at what we have signed on to, there are 3 documents that I'd like perhaps just to explain to the public.
Yes, sure.
One, we have something called the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Number 2, we have a protocol known as the Maputo Protocol. And number 3, we have a UN document known as the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. Now, in sum total, these 3 international documents give an obligation for the state, which is Kenya, to come up with laws that ensure equality of spouses during the marriage and at the time of the dissolution of the marriage. And in particular, if you look at the Maputo Protocol, there's an article known as Article 7D of the Maputo Protocol that talks about the obligation of Kenya as a state that has signed on to that document to say that the country must come up with a law that ensures the principle of fairness in distribution of matrimonial property. Now, that principle of fairness means that you recognize that in addition to financial contribution by the spouses, there's what we call the non-monetary contribution.
Absolutely, yes.
Where a woman does not necessarily have to have contributed through finances going to work. But this woman has over time taken care of children. She has taken over the responsibilities of household duties. She has been taking care of the children. She has perhaps been tilling the land and therefore contributing in her own unique ways towards the marriage. And what the international laws have said is that in coming up with a formula to distribute matrimonial property, factor in the non-monetary contribution of this woman, which is what now has become very difficult, because how do you quantify this non-monetary contribution?
Absolutely. And you're very vocal about, the court and Justice Mativo ignoring the obligation that we have as a country at the international level, right? So I'm just going to quote what Justice Mativo said, and he said, "A person cannot walk into a marriage and then walk out with more than what they deserve." And I'd like to know your views on that, Mr. Mbugua.
Thank you so much, Dan. I think I agree with what my sister is actually saying, Tabitha, about a woman or a wife who has been married and then she has not been working, but they have been taking care of the children, the husband, the house duties. And then when it comes to divorce, then there's nothing she can stand for. It means that work cannot be quantified, it cannot be monetized. So that has to be put into consideration when actually divorce comes. But as it comes to that person now, I can win my marriage today, and probably for reasons that are natural, my spouse goes on and she passes on, and we had acquired wealth with her, okay? Then after that, I feel that I cannot be able to leave her alone. Let me get another wife.
Yes.
Then I stay with that wife maybe for 1 or 2 years. She decides to divorce me for reasons that she knows. Is it really fair for her to share what we had acquired with my former wife? And maybe she stayed there for 2 years, and we had stayed with that other wife for so many years. So that is unfair. I would imagine that every situation should be looked at the way it is. Because if we encourage that, we are going to encourage the culture of gold diggers, whereby now somebody can come and get married to you for a few years and then quits and takes you to court
but they have
and
their
shares.
own intentions.
And they have their own intentions.
So can I just respond to that?
Justice Matibo was actually very right. And just before she responds, I also want to pose a question to her as a way of contribution. We have this woman who has acquired her property even before I married her, or she's married to any man. She has a property, she has vehicles, she has houses, she has even land, and she gets married to me now. What is now going to happen to that property she had acquired before we got married?
Very good question.
Is it going to be combined with mine so that we share together? Or am I the only person who's supposed to share that, whatever she has? Another one is, we have divorced. And when we have divorced, we have children, isn't it? Since we have children, and when they become of age about 18 years and over, I mean, they are entitled. They are entitled to what their parents had. Will they only be entitled to what I have, or even what the wife has, because she has already taken off with a portion of my property? No, as a legal mind, can you shed more light on that?
Very good, very. I'll say this. He asks the questions that every common mwananchi is asking. And I want to distinguish something so that we can be very clear. Now, matrimonial property is property that is acquired during the subsistence of the marriage. So whatever you came to the marriage with when your first wife died is your property, okay? It starts being the joint property. What the Act talks about is any property that is acquired during the subsistence of the marriage. Yes. So what we're talking about is even for that woman who comes to the marriage with her Range Rover, that is her property. And that remains your property in law because you acquired it before the marriage. Yeah. Now, what we are concentrating on here is marriage, is the property that is acquired during the subsistence of the marriage. So for that 2 years that you've been married to this new spouse that you have, what have the contributions been for the various respective spouses? So I want you to very well be reassured that the law, the Matrimonial Property Act, actually talks about distinguishing those two. Matrimonial property is that property that is acquired during the subsistence of the marriage, when you marry this person.
I think this is where the big confusion comes in.
Let me say this. You know, I think you cannot just go back to where we have come from. But I think all this business has been brought about by the empowerment, by the Musungu, by the Musungu knowledge, women empowerment. Because the Bible, I'm a Christian and I like quoting the Bible. When two come together, they become one flesh, isn't it? A man will leave his father and mother, they become one flesh. So we have just become one flesh. It's like you take a paper and you put a glue on it. When you try to remove the glue from the paper, you are just telling those people they can never be detached. So this kind of divorce and doing things is actually wrong, because I don't see how you can come with your Range Rover, you come with your land, you come with your house, you are married to me, yeah, they are yours, and you don't want them to be mine, but you want to use mine, and then when you are using mine, you are still taking mine to your level. You know,
it brings about the point where we're saying there's a bit of confusion, and we need to clarify exactly what this ruling says.
Exactly. Now, I want again to re-emphasize that what we are considering here, I want us to take ourselves into the scenario whereby you have come with your own property. It would be unfair for the court to start determining how to apportion me property that you acquired before we got married. Okay? So that one in law, the law says you keep what you had at the time when you were a single person. What we're talking about is, for instance, a woman who has come into a relationship with a man, glued together, as my colleague says, and then after that, 25 years down the line, this woman has been tilling land. She has been earning, she has been going to the market, she has been taking care of the farm, she's been taking care of the homestead. Things happen. Sometimes love gets lost, and true, you separate. How do we determine for those 25 years who gets what? And this is what FIDA and the rest of the parties who were enjoined on that case wanted the court to determine. So it's not a question of, I came in with my Range Rover, I wanted it to use, no. The assumption in marriage, and I want us that to be the starting point, is that we come into a loving relationship where we do not anticipate divorce. Nobody gets into a marriage for divorce purposes. You do not get into a union. You get into a union because you want to commit to it. You want to live for the rest of your life with this person. But sometimes when things go wrong, how do you determine who gets what, particularly for the time that was invested in the marriage, the 25 years? And that's what I want us to distinguish, so that it's not said that it is unfair. Whatever you came into the marriage with is yours and remains yours, whether a man or a woman. That is what the law says.
I think that
for purposes of now what has been contributed during those 25 or 35 years that we've been together, this is what we wanted the court to tell us. Who gets what share? So this what is all formula is used?
The wealth you have accumulated when you are together. Mr. Mbugua.
I wanted to say that, okay, Tabitha is actually coming out very well. But I want to slightly disagree with her that people just come getting married with the fear of just spending the rest of their lives there without going out. That used to happen to our mothers. Those who were married in the 50s and 60s and early 70s used to enter marriage without any feeling of moving out. They never saw any exit. But today's women, my dear, they are coming in with a purpose of exiting.
Actually, that is true.
They were coming with the purpose of exiting. And he will look at somebody and say, this is somebody with a lot of money, with blah, 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 blah. So I will get married to that particular person, and I make sure that we go, I get a license, I go to the AG or to the church. I make sure that he's actually tied to me. He has no reason of running away. Whenever he tends to run away, I'll get hold of him. I've seen this because you go to children's courts today, the children's department. You find a woman has one or two men who she's claiming to be maintained by these ladies, by these gentlemen. You got a kid with me, you got a kid with me, so you have to, it's kind of, you're siphoning money from this man. So I think you as lawyers, I don't know what you're going to do, but you need to educate people on this. Okay. That you don't enter that marriage with a mentality of a gold digger. That you're coming to dig gold there.
All right. So I actually want our viewers back at home to contribute to this discussion. And the question for the day is, do you think couples who divorce are entitled to what they each contribute during the union? Do you think couples who divorce are entitled to what they each contribute during the union? You can reach us out on our social media platforms. Our Facebook page is K24TV. Instagram and Twitter is at K24TV. Let us know what your views are, and we shall be sampling them right here on K24 Alfajiri. We shall now take a short commercial break. When we come back, as we mentioned earlier, Mr. Burale is going to be joining us, so do not go anywhere. Welcome back to K24 Alfajiri. We are now counting down to the last 30 minutes of the show. And before the commercial break, we were actually talking about divorce and property. The question that I had posed to you people back at home was, do you think couples who divorce are entitled to what they each contributed during the union? Do you think couples who divorce are entitled to what each contributed during the union? You can keep your views coming in. As I mentioned earlier, we're live on our social media platforms. Just to remind you that our Facebook page is K24TV, Instagram and Twitter is at K24TV. And you can actually just call us live because we have a very interesting panel who will be able to answer all the questions that you have as pragmatic as they can. And as I mentioned earlier that we were going to be joined by Mr. Burale, who's now in studio. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much.
Why are you late, by the way?
Traffic just caught me. I even wanted to go and shave a quick couldn't even shave.
Okay, Sasa. Please just introduce yourself to our viewers.
Well, I'm Robert Burale. Which camera should I look at? Just look at you. Okay. Robert Burale is my name. I'm Minister of the Gospel, corporate trainer, and a father to the most beautiful girl in Eastern Central Africa.
Okay.
Yes.
What a title. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And Robert, today we are talking about divorce and property, and you're joining us as a divorcee.
Right.
Or someone who has gone through a divorce.
Yes.
Kindly just tell us, how was your experience?
I mean, divorce is never a good thing. As they said earlier, nobody gets into marriage with a view of divorce at all. And what happens when two people come together in marriage, it means that they loved each other at some point.
Yes.
So when they decide to separate, the first stage is very ugly. And then you all go your way, maybe throw your hands off each other. And then privately you go through depression, excuse me, you go through feeling like a letdown, you go to a pity party. You go through about 5 stages before you get to a place of, okay, I've accepted. When my marriage ended, it took me about 6 months to even tell the public. So I'd do all my businesses with my ring on. Then I decided, man, it's heavier carrying that load. But nobody should ever lie to you that divorce is an easy thing. It is one of the most difficult things that anybody can ever go through. A separation is not easy. So when we hear things like separating the things you gathered, while it's good and it's sad at the same time, because marriage is not a contract. Marriage is a covenant. If you enter into marriage as if it's a contract, then you will look for your interest. If you enter in it as a covenant, you look for the other person's interest. And these laws are supposed to be there, yes, but also I feel it's now creating a room to allow people to enter into a marriage as a contract, whereby now I'll enter with one eye looking at the exit door. And this, for me, is now the catalyst to a higher percentage of divorces. I am divorced. It is not a good thing. I love the marriage institution. It is a godly institution. You understand what I'm saying? But now, and I'll say this, and maybe people might bash me for saying this, when you see people thinking about finances as soon as they start their divorce proceedings, it means the reason as to why they entered there was wrong. Was wrong at all. I mean, if you separate, the last thing I'll think about is a Range Rover.
Okay.
The last thing I'll think about is the bank account.
All right.
I just want to recover.
Sawa. So, well, before the commercial break, Mr. Mbugua had a very important point that he raised up, and this was about women coming into marriage. As you said, women are coming into marriage with another intention other than love.
Is it just women? Because I'm finding that a bit offensive that we are categorizing this to be a women's issue only. I think
maybe why you are looking at it like that, perhaps, is because you know women, women from, we are Africans actually, we are first Africans, let us agree on that. And when it comes to this distribution 50-50 of whatever we have gotten during our marriage, most African marriages are governed by the customs that surround them. For instance, if I marry Dan or if I marry you today, and you are going to go through the Kikuyu customary marriage, and I do all the rites, the last one being the gurario. I do the gurario and we do everything. Do you know that even if we divorce, I divorce you and you die, I'll bury you because you're still my wife. So there's nothing like divorce when it comes to such cultures. You go to different cultures, they look at it differently. Then we come back to my perception as far as the modern spouses. Let's even use men. They're also doing that. But compared to the number of men and women who are entering marriage, looking at it as a contract, I think the female gender is up.
Do you have any statistics to support this?
It's actually there. It's actually there.
Quote for me statistics to show that
because
you
see the kind of clients, I can always say from the kind of clients that I have seen, when they come, you find somebody saying, I want to see what can I get out of this? What can I get out of this? And I actually agree with what Burale has echoed, that if you enter that institution looking for a contract as opposed to a covenant, you are likely to do that. So I think our society has not reached that level whereby we can talk of this separating this and that. This is the first world, according to me. This is the first world. The wazungus ndio wanafanya hii mambo. Sisi wa Afrika, mahali tumefika, we are betrayed, we talk, we call elders, we sit. We cannot just let a woman who has been married for 20 years just to disappear like that. There is her children, there is her upkeep. She's supposed to be looked into because she has also contributed to that. But when you say at 50-50, we are going to encourage the culture of people coming, getting married for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then disappearing something. A man can also do that, not only a woman. A man can also do that.
All right, okay, Mr. Mbugua, let me just take it back to Burale, because I'm sure you've heard that recently FIDA has lost a battle, you know, for divorced couples to share 50-50 wealth. And I was just reading a quote, actually. I was quoting Justice Mativo, who said, a person cannot walk into a marriage and then walk out with more than what they deserve. What's your view on that?
It's a very tricky one. Because, you know, the Bible says he who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor. So a man sometimes will get more wealth because of the favor the wife brings. The wife might be a homemaker, housewife, and the guy is working somewhere. But out of the favor that the wife brings, he goes up the corporate ladder. Okay. Then the man comes and says, you know, I got 7 promotions and this is my money, so go away. And yet that wife came with that favor. Absolutely. So I would think you cannot quantify that, and the wife can bring much more to the man while she's still at home. You understand what I'm saying? And I frown upon, allow me just to go off, I frown upon these laws. Yes, they have to be done because we're on earth. But every time you put a law that says if you separate, you go with your 50-50, you are now even illuminating people's mind into thinking about divorce, and they had not previously thought about it. And ask yourself one question. How comes, I'm sure Madame will help us here, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a preacher man. How comes there is a high rate of divorce with people who have money? Okay. Broke people don't divorce week in, week out.
They don't.
Well, by the way, my marriage ended after 1 year, 2 days. It's not right. Okay. You understand what I'm saying?
And do you mind just sharing with us how your experience was when it comes to property division?
No, the good thing is that my ex-wife is a very mature lady, and we didn't have acrimony. But having said that, other people, I've counseled other people who have gone through worse, you understand? Right. Social media, abusing each other and all that kind of nonsense. You understand what I'm saying? But what is happening also, why the laws are coming up is because there's a need because of the high case of divorces. So you can't blame the lawyers coming up with all these things. But also, if you take it back, it is because we are raising boys and not men. So people go into marriage to take care of the sexual itch and nothing else. Not, a man doesn't, most men don't go to say, I'm going to be a leader, I'm going to have a vision that is worthy to be followed by a woman. So you go take care of that itch that is sex. And then when it becomes normal, because after a few months, it is normal. So nothing holds you together. And then we also have ladies who are going into marriage to prove a point. She had been dumped by 4 of her ex-boyfriends. So yeah, so it's like, you know, it's fashionable. So the church is not teaching about how it is to be a good husband. The church is not preparing women how it is to be good wives. Parents are not discussing these things because parents are watching football. Women are in too many chamas every weekend. So the kids are being raised by what they see on social media. You understand? And what do they see on social media? Kim Kardashian. What do they see on social media? Beyonce. You understand what I'm saying?
Okay, so your point basically, and if I'm not wrong, Mr. Burale and Mr. Mbugua, your point is that women empowerment has contributed a lot to this.
I'm a believer that women must be empowered. Okay. But we are not training men to handle an empowered woman. An empowered woman. I will never stand on any platform to blame a woman for being empowered. Women don't like vacuums. So if the men have abdicated their seat, a woman will take the position. So men need to up their game.
Okay. I want to contextualize
just before Tabitha comes in, I want to agree with what Burale has said. That women have to be empowered. Because me, I have one daughter, and she's totally empowered. She has got, I've educated her to the level she has got 2 degrees, and she's doing more, and she has got a good job. I am for women empowerment. But my take is this: can we do each gender's role? Burale is a preacher, and she knows that there are roles for women, there are roles for men, isn't it? That when you go to the house, this is where the empowerment is bringing an issue. When we go to the house, we come from job in the evening. I don't expect you to move out at the night to find out what is happening there when there is a commotion outside. Myself as a man, I'll just walk and find out. When guests come into
Now, what about
the room,
equality?
excuse me, when guests come into the room, you don't expect me to go and fetch tea for them.
But what
because
about
these are feminine
Mr.
issues.
What about equality,
just-
Mr. Mbugua? What about equality?
Equality.
Yes.
What kind of equality?
Okay.
Let equality
All
be.
right.
Let equality be when we are
honestly,
when you are
I'm
employed,
getting
let us be
offended.
paid the same amount
All right.
of money.
So,
But
so.
when we reach the home front,
Yes.
let roles be there
Okay.
because there are roles for a
So,
man and
so.
roles
Yes,
for
Tabitha,
a
please.
Sarah, I
Yes.
just, because I'm going to get offended if we start talking about socialization
Yes.
and assignment of
Yes.
roles. I believe that before I just get into what I want to say, allow me to just make a statement in reaction to what Mr. Mbugua has just said. That society has advanced, that we no longer look at women purely on the basis of whether she can serve me good tea or not.
Very true.
I believe the reason why you're here, why I'm here, is because of the fact that we have disassociated ourselves from that socialization, that I am supposed to be making tea for my husband, and that I'm supposed to be a homemaker. And as it is, this is not the discussion that we're supposed to have today. So allow me to bring it back to what we're supposed to
Very
have
true,
today.
yes.
Now, we have spoken about the modernized woman, the empowered woman. But from where I sit and from where I work every day, I want to give you a perfect example of what we have on the ground. I have women in Rarieda, I have women in Siaya, I have women in Kisumu that I work with every day.
Okay.
Widows who have lost
Yeah.
property purely on the basis of patriarchal and cultural settings.
Okay.
Now, I have a woman who has been separated from her husband after 25 years of marriage. This woman used to till land, she used to earn money, the money would be used at home, and part of her savings were actually used to purchase a piece of land
By the
in the
man.
name of the
All
man.
right. Okay. And
Now,
on
25
that
years
very
down the
point,
line-
Tabitha, just let me just interrupt you because we'd like to take a call from Wilson from Kisumu. Good morning, Wilson. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Yes. What's your question? What's your contribution?
I'm saying, I think this 50-50 after divorce thing is leading to a social rot. The reason I'm saying this is that, you see, marriage is supposed to be viewed as very healthy covenant where a man comes, a woman comes and joins a man as is enshrined in the Bible. I'm a Christian. But the current thing that is happening is, you see, this thing has just activated a business. I mean, marriages are now becoming businesses because it has opened the minds of people. And unfortunately, I think the female folk are the ones that are now being advantaged because I've been looking at some social media platforms where women are the minority. I mean, when this thing was in court, they were openly celebrating. It was like they were hitting back at men for reasons that are just known to them. A marriage should be something that is clean, something that it is a covenant, and not the business-like thing that we are now seeing. The moment, as the two gentlemen have put it, the moment you now start talking about property being divided into 50-50,
okay,
people will not
thank
be
you.
committed to their marriages. Instead,
Thank you very much, Wilson. Thank you very much. Yes, Tabitha, do you have a... Yes.
Can I just contextualize something in terms of people understanding why is the law there, and why is it that we are fighting for, equitable distribution of property? Now, as it is, based on that judgment, what will happen currently, I want to just give a few statistics just to support this. As we see it here, if you go to the Ministry of Lands and walk in and ask them to give you a list of all the property owners, title holders, 70% of titles are in men's names, okay? Now that should be at the back of our minds. Now, number two, we have the patriarchal and cultural settings that have always disadvantaged women. And as a result of that, women in Kenya and elsewhere in Africa have always borne a disproportionate burden when it comes to ownership of property. That is the truth of the matter. Number two, when we talk about the judgment that Justice Mativo has just given, what has the end result has been that the courts have said that for each case that comes before us, you'll be expected to demonstrate to this court what your contribution was.
Absolutely.
And our issue with that has been the uncertainty that comes with non-monetary contribution or even financial contribution, because if you're going to get married and 25 years or 30 years down the line, I have not been keeping receipts from day one with the intention that when we get divorced, I will show this to the court. And that is why I insisted and say that people get into marriages because this is a union of love. I am not here with the intention that one day I will get divorced.
Yeah,
and therefore, you do not keep receipts. You do not keep this as an arsenal and tell yourself that when the moment comes, I will be able to show the court that these are the bank statements showing my financial contribution. And this leaves a lot of uncertainty when it comes to proving what your contribution was. Now, as much as that is what has happened is that at the end of it all, we have to accept that divorce will happen because, yes, it is happening. So how do we make sure that this situation remains so, as he was saying, the acrimonious element of it, that we remove that acrimonious element, that we remove that tedious exercise of showing to the court how much you contributed.
Okay.
When there's a formula, when there's something that is very set in stone, it's easier for me to say, okay, we don't have to fight this because the law is very clear. You'll get this, I'll get this.
All right.
But as it is right now, more parties will get into marriages and now start keeping receipts because Justice Mativo said you have to show and keeping divorce in mind.
Okay.
Let me ask.
This was to be a workable formula.
I just want us to focus on the marriage setup where you as a man tells me as a woman that, you know what, I just want you to sit at home and take care of the children. So that means I'm investing emotions into this. Or a case where you're sick, you're diabetic, you have cancer. I decide to stop working to take care of you. When we divorce, how does that play out?
And that's why I think
property distribution.
Let me add something so that Burale can react to that one. I think even as we discuss this issue of divorce and what one is supposed to get, I think we need to ask ourselves, why do people divorce? And we have Burale here. Okay. Because the reasons that make you divorce will make you either go for financial gain or for emotional gain for something else. Then why do people divorce actually? What are the major causes that make people divorce? Because unless we unpack that one, then we are going to get informed as to why this issue of finances and all that will come in. But I want to say this. I agree with what Burale said. We are not preparing our people for marriage. Because today, you look at a wedding, most people are preparing for weddings, not marriages. Because you sit down, you have even no budget for counseling. The budget you have is for the big day, the big wedding, the fleet of vehicles, the cakes, the what. But that will be just an occasion, a drama for a few hours. Whatever will happen the rest of the life, you are not preparing the couples for that.
All right.
So,
so back to my question, Mr. Burale.
I actually think this law will hurt women more. And having said that, there are also men who are taken care of by their wives.
Absolutely.
Now, if a man says, this land is mine, it's on my title and all that, we have to put at the back of our mind the peace he got at home because of his wife enabled him to go out there and be successful in his area of vocation. So then how do you come and tell that woman, you just came with 5 dresses, and yet what she invested, which is emotional and peace, is worth much more than those 50 acres of land that the man is saying, now this is mine, and then you take that and go and marry a slave queen who comes into a table that is already set without any input in that marriage, and then you leave this woman frustrated with 5 children. You understand what I'm saying? So it's wrong when we castigate the ladies so much. And the African culture is wired to do that, unfortunately. But show me a man who is succeeding out there, and I'll show you a woman with high wisdom.
Thank you very much. And don't you think, actually, we were having this conversation right before we came on set. This law kind of protects the rich who have mipanga candles all over the place, So it's protecting me because the one who's going to benefit in all this is either my wife, of which we're not even sure whether it's going to protect the wife, but also, don't you think even this woman, this other women you have children with deserve to be taken care of? They deserve, to take a seat at the table.
Your ex-wife, you're saying?
No. The other girls who are not in the marriage.
But why are they there in the first place?
But can I give what the law says, and then we can have what the society says?
Let's get the legal point.
They are there. And agree they are there.
For purposes of succession, say for instance you die, And we have seen this, and it's a shame because it has come out particularly when politicians have died, where there's the wife who is the valid wife in a certificate, but we also have other players who have been there. What the Law of Succession Act talks about is that for purposes of inheritance, even this woman who is not married in terms of a ring and a wedding ceremony, for purposes of succession, this woman is considered as a wife. That is what the Law of Succession Act talks about.
She's a wife.
She is considered as a wife for purposes of inheritance, for purposes of getting something from you. The law protects that woman. Now, I want us to go back to the divorce. The one who has invested 25 years, 35 years, where she dropped her career, she dropped everything that she was doing. She became a caregiver. You became the money earner. She became the homemaker. I want to give the gentlemen who are here the story of Echaria versus Echaria. This is a very...
Before you do that, actually, I'd like to just sample a few tweets and social media reactions. Shiro is actually on the other side because social media is actually blowing up. Right, Shiro?
Yes, you can only imagine the kind of emotion that's being elicited from this conversation. Let's start off with Kevin Winder, who says, this is awesome. You can't claim what you never toiled for. Clearly, Kevin Winder is in support of this. Just basically people leaving the marriage with 50% of what they contributed. Alex said, yes, that's the way to go now. Wow, so you can see a lot of support there. Mark says, absolutely yes, 50-50 after divorce would commercialize marriage such that women will keep on hopping from man to man and continue to accumulate wealth. I think I will... Let me be quiet about that because we have a censorship policy. Kuboka says, I love how Tabitha is articulating the issue and it is based on laws, statistics, and experiences. We need to keep off gender roles and religious beliefs. So Kuboka here is saying that when it comes to the law, we have to be very factual and base it on statistics and the law and not on emotion or whatever subjective cultural bias we might have. Serah?
Okay, thank you very much, Shiro. Well, those are your reactions on our social media platforms. Please just keep on talking to us and we shall be answering all the questions and reading your comments. Before that, you wanted to bring up the case of Echaria versus Echaria.
So a shout out to Kuboka. Yeah, I have fans out there. But going back to this issue, contextualizing what we see on the ground. Echaria versus Echaria, a case that was decided before the 2010 Constitution, of Priscilla Njeri, a woman who was married to someone who was, if I can say now in layman's terms, an ambassador. Now this woman gave up her career. She gave up 25 years of her life to follow her husband, assist him with his ambassadorial duties, his diplomatic duties, in terms of entertaining people who came to their house, entertaining and serving tea, as my friend here was talking about, being a hostess, while Peter, her husband, was out there being an ambassador and a representative of Kenya. Now, when it came to the divorce, this was one of the most heartbreaking decisions that has ever been made in Kenya, because this decision is what has informed the Matrimonial Property Act about non-monetary contribution. This woman gave her entire life and dedicated her all, dropped her professional career. Someone who was educated, could have had master's degrees, PhDs and everything, but chose to support her husband because marriage was a covenant that she valued and she knew what, you know, she's your Proverbs 31 woman, and she gave it her all. But as I say, the reality on the ground is that divorce happens. I do not have reasons why. There's no baseline that has been done as to the common reasons and trends of why divorce is happening. But when it does happen, to make it as less acrimonious as possible, this decision was the most heartbreaking decision, because her contribution was valued to about what, 25%?
Oh, wow.
As to the entire property that had been acquired.
Right.
Now, as a result, we have seen the courts progress in terms of saying that this is bad law. And currently, as it exists, Echaria versus Echaria has been deemed to be bad law because it, at that point, made a woman lose everything based on the fact that the court did not recognize what non-monetary contribution was.
All right. Okay, and because of time, we have to end it right there. maybe Mr. Burale, real quick, you can give us your final remarks on this. Real quick, 30 seconds.
Wow, I just think we are getting to a place where divorce is fashionable. We're getting to a place where everybody enters into marriage wondering how long will we be there for. And I think we really need to go back to the drawing board and tell people you're in this for keeps. I'm informed by the Bible.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Mbugua?
I want to say that
real quick.
I want to say that if you enter marriage, enter marriage and don't see an exit. If you see an exit when you enter the marriage, surely you are going to see it. And again, I appeal to people here to get prepared. Go for premarital counseling, go for professionals, be good about marriage, because there are so many reasons that make people just divorce. You enter that institution of marriage and you realize, wow, I am not compatible with this kind of a person. So I have to go. You have to be broadened. Be prepared about marriage, but not a wedding.
Thank you very much. Tabitha, please.
The danger of what we have currently based on Justice Mativo's judgment is that we do not have a predictable way of how contributions will be made, how separation will happen, and how property will be assigned. And that means that it will be left to the whims of a judge who may have a bias as to how he or she thinks contribution should be made. If it could be predictable, it would make it less acrimonious for the two parties.
All right,
That's my parting shot.
Thank you very much, Burale. Thank you, Tabitha. Thank you, Mr. Mbugua, for being part of this discussion. And a big thank you to you for tuning in and for asking all those questions that you did. It has been quite an interesting show, interesting reaction. Shiro, what do you think about the 50-50 wealth distribution?
With Tabitha, I think there is the ways in which personal bias could find its way into judgments, especially because, especially to measure contribution. What happens if I'm a stay-at-home wife and mother? How is my contribution going to be monetized? So these are ways in which, fine, in the interest of fairness, we need to, also curb, like what the contributor said, that women hopping from marriage to marriage, trying to accumulate wealth. But on the other hand, I'm sure the women who have contributed in childbirth that are going to lose.
Jeff?
A very interesting issue right there. And all I'm saying is, like he said, at the end of the day, you should try and get in there with no looking for the exit.
Absolutely.
Because if you look for it, you'll find it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us today. Tomorrow is Hangout Friday.
Whoop, whoop.
Yes.
Finally, Friday is upon us. Have a great Thursday. We'll be back tomorrow.
Bye-bye.